Take back control. Stop letting algorithms decide your news. Get uncensored history and real knowledge to strengthen your mind, body, and spirit. Watch ad-free content now at ineverknewtv.com premium. Want to say welcome back to a fan favorite here at I Never Knew TV, Akil Parker. Fire, what's going on?
What's going on, man?
According to the U.S. Census Bureau's 2023 American Community Survey, and I know you can play around with statistics. I'm just using this for our statistics people out there because they need to hear numbers for validation. It says 31% of black people in America are married, right? This means a large portion of our population is co-parenting because people do have kids. Yet, there doesn't seem to be many conversations or resources dedicated to educating us on healthy and productive ways to co-parent. Seems like we love to having conversations that will promote dysfunction in our communities, but not how to deal with those dysfunctions.
So I think it falls in line with a lot of things, in our community that we don't really learn and we don't really study or, learn about or learn how to do. Co-parenting is one of those things where, it often doesn't come naturally, right? And like I said, like a lot of things, like we don't like have classes or have like instruction to get a better understanding of like how to do certain things. And then you couple that with the fact that, sometimes like the more dramatic, and unhealthy relationships can be better for the economy, right?
Facts. Delve into that a little deeper before you.
Yeah, because we live in a monopoly capitalistic society where it's all about, everybody's like about the profit margin, so it's like the dysfunction, may be more helpful because then it's like instead of having one family, under one roof, now you two rents, you got two Walmart trips or whatever, two Target trips, like, and then you got to transport people. That's more gas you using in your car. All types of different types of things like that. And these are kind of like the behind the scenes, like details that don't get taken into consideration all the time. Sometimes as parents and even as adults, we may make decisions that are more beneficial to us as opposed to the children, or even we may not actually have. We may not value marriage as much. That may be part of it. And I think I think for a very long time when I was younger, I didn't really value marriage, as much. That's part of the reason I have an ex-wife, but I also have two baby mothers, prior to my ex-wife, right? In large part because I really didn't value, marriage as much in my 20s and whatnot.
Explain, what do you mean by you didn't value marriage?
I saw it as, I wanted to be a father. I always wanted to be a father. I wanted to, have children, but I wasn't following that. I was following a different order of operations, I would say, than what I follow now, because now I see it. Now it makes sense, how the elders, would get married, then, settle down, get married, then have the children. Hopefully they stay together, everything works out, right? But, coming up in, I guess the era I was coming up in, it just seemed more fashionable, like, to, just have children, I just had different values, but I think that goes back to your point of just having like, kind of like training or like, socialization, like a different socialization process. And I grew up in a 2-parent household. So that, and I know a lot of people that grew up in 2-parent households, but then when they had children, they created co-parenting situations like I did, right? But I think it's because a lot of the things I was exposed to, I was like, nah, I don't want that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so, but I wanted to be a father though, So, but like I said, it was like, to connect it to the math, I was on a different type of order of operations.
And I need to bring up Baba Amos Wilson, right? Because he always speaks about the intention and purpose of education. And I think that I've really been on systems fight. I've really been on analyzing systems and creating systems that can work for us. And what I'm seeing is that we're in denial about our environment and the reality of our culture. Now, it may not be an ideal part of the culture, but it's a reality that's impacting a lot of people. So what makes sense that we provided resources and so many people are doing it, how to do it effectively and in a good manner that everyone could benefit. Because I think the idea is that avoid it. People not avoiding it. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. And you're not promoting it. But if it does happen, and since it's happened at such a high level, we do need more, um, whether it's institutions or resources that could assist.
Yeah, yeah. Because you know, and I think you know a lot of people like kind of reject that, like what you just said about us needing like resources and institutions to provide that type of support. Because a lot of people just operate on this kind of attitude generally that like people should just know better. You know, you should just know better. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't need no class or like you know no weekly meeting or you know you don't need nobody to come show you like some stuff you should and maybe there are some individuals that do just know better, but there's a lot of people that you know just don't just know better. Like even myself, like I know a lot of stuff, but there's some stuff I don't know, and like I would benefit from like yeah I would like to go to like a weekly class on this topic or you know maybe bi-weekly, even if it's monthly, you know what I'm saying, just check in like you know because I got some questions, you know.
And hey, listening to you, man. So you know we had the elders there, right? And the elders would kind of fill in that void where we say we should know. People didn't know fire. People always taught things. It's very rare
Right,
someone just knows stuff.
right,
I
right.
don't know where that idea comes from. And since we don't have that community, we don't have the elders, it needs to be supplemented by something.
Hmm.
And it has to be something structured that a person with that experience can share that information, give guidance, and give support.
Yeah.
You know?
It reminds me of like the mutual aid societies, like
Yeah.
in the 19th century. Like I think about like places like Philadelphia when you had like Richard Allen, people like him, people like Absalom Jones, like Richard Allen. He's like, you know, the first, you know, bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church and whatnot. And, you know, they started these like, you know, mutual aid societies. And like I think one of the organizations was the Free African Society, right? To provide support for people that was coming out of chattel slavery, you know. So I think we got to get and there are some people you know today that do that type of work, but I think we have to be even more intentional with
Very intentional.
creating more of that, you know, even more of that, and have that become like mainstream because a lot of it has been kind of the control of that has been usurped by like government entities and government apparatuses, which in a lot of cases we really can't control. So like you know you got the school might offer this or whatnot, but I think we need to get back to where we had like you know community organizations like how the Black Panther Party for Self Defense, they had the free breakfast program, and then they was doing like the different health screen. They had the health clinic set up, and they was just providing fulfilling these needs that the community had. So more of us like in the community got to do more of that, you know, and also support the people that are already doing it, because it is people out here that's doing it, but those people need support. They need like you know they need support in terms of volunteers. They need financial support. They just some of it's just promotion, like just let people know like oh they doing this over here, you know you should go over there. You know what I mean?
But you made up a great point, right? You say, hey, listen, once a brother separated from a woman, many men struggle to shift their mindset from being a husband or a boyfriend to focusing solely on their role as a father. Why do you think this transition is so difficult, and how can men navigate this effectively?
I think people in general are just like resistant to change, and a lot of times, you know, brothers, we feel like, you know, that's still my girl. You know, it's my girl, or it's like my wife, or it's still like it's my baby mom. You know what I mean? Like it's like a feeling of yeah, it's territorial. It's a territorial nature to it. Sometimes it deals with possession. Sometimes it can be like you know
Pride.
unhealthy. Yeah, like pride. Just a lot of things. So the natural inclination may not be to like be able to compartmentalize, but you really have to. Like and also you have to realize that like it's really not about you. You know, it's not about really primarily about you or her. It's about the child. So I think we got to get to a place where we're like constantly thinking about like what is the best, what is going to provide the best outcome for the child, right? Because oftentimes that doesn't even come into play. It's like we're only looking at like what we want, like you know, and not men and women both do this. We're like, you know, the woman might be like, well, what do I want? And the man's like, well, what do I want? And then we end up clashing because we might be diametrically opposed. You know what I mean? Like say, oh, another math term, like with the diameter, we're on opposite sides of the circle, right? So we diametrically opposed, and you know the child is there like not getting what they need because we're too busy beefing. And even if it means you gotta like, you know, you gotta lose. Like I had a like my work study supervisor from like 25 years ago when I was a freshman in college. One of the things that she told us one day in the office was like, sometimes you have to concede in order to win. You know what I mean? So you gotta be willing to like take a L if it's for the greater good. And winning might not mean that you personally win. Winning might mean that the child wins. You know, the child gets what they need. 'Cause that's really what it's got to be about. You know, I mean, it should already be about that. But you know, with co-parenting, you know, it gets a little challenging. And when I speak on this, I'm speaking from experience. So I'm speaking from like, because I remember, like, I'm like, yo, I know what it's like to be diametrically opposed to the woman you had a child with, and I want this and she want that, and I'm focused on winning, right? Getting what I want, right? And then the child is not getting, you know, what they need. So, you know, this is practice, not as much theory, you know.
When did the maturity kick in the word you could shift?
Over time, just gradually, just like, you know, because it's kind of like experimentation. It's like science, you know. You're just trying different things, you know. Well, let me see what happens, you know, when I try this or when I try that, you know what I mean? And you know, if it works and you feel like, you know, there's a more healthy outcome, and then you notice that, okay, we're not beefing no more. Okay, we're getting along better. You know, we're amicable now. Okay, cool. You know, it's like, and then you gotta realize, like, I think part of maturity is like not feeling like you gotta win all the time, not feeling like you gotta go to war all the time, like gotta win every battle, like, or even things have to be a battle. Like sometimes like stuff don't have to be a battle, and I think a lot of times that deals with like that's a result of emotional development and emotional growth, because oftentimes you end up like entering into a battle with somebody because you're under the assumption that they're trying to battle you because of how you interpret something that they said or something that they did or something that they didn't say or didn't do. And it might not even be that deep, but you might still be in your feelings because you're not as able to regulate your own emotions. So now it's like you consistently find yourself in this space where it's like, okay, we got to go to war now because like I don't like how she said that, and it's like it wasn't even that serious. Or like, and like, you know, a lot of things do get lost in translation with text messaging. So you might read a message, you might read into it like what she trying to say, like, you know what I mean? Like, so now it's like now I got to text back, like it's gonna be a problem now, right? But you know, when you have that, you develop that emotional maturity, then you're like, no, it's cool, you know, it's not that deep, you know what I mean? And I think one of the other things that helps with that is you got to have something going on. Like a lot of us don't have nothing going
Too
on.
much time on their hands, bro.
Yeah, you got time to beef.
Too much time on
Like
their
if
hands.
you got a lot going on, then it's
You gotta
like
have time.
I don't got time. Yeah, I don't got time to fight with you. You know, and even when somebody might want to fight with you, it's like you might notice it and you might be like, you got it, you right, because I got to do this over here because at times I'll think back, you know, and I think back on moments when I took time to like beef, and
Say
it
that
really
again. You took time.
I took time to beef, and it really was a hindrance. Like when you do like the cost benefit analysis on it, you look back, you're like, damn, like if I had decided to not beef, I would have been much further along in this project, that project, or just this work I was doing over here or whatever.
Because I just want to add, sorry to cut you, but the thing is with this confrontation is that not only is time wasted with the actual confrontation, but the time is wasted with the mental confrontation when you're not actually in confrontation with that person.
Right.
So you already wasted time interacting with the person.
Right.
Then now you're interacting in your brain, wasting more time.
For the, you know, something I remember learning about in middle school, because you know how they try to like, you know, schools are very neo-colonial, so they try to give you the Eurocentric spin on everything. So we studying like Greek mythology and whatnot, and we learn about a Pyrrhic victory, right? It's like when you win something, but the cost was so great that it wasn't worth it. You know what I mean? So a lot of times it's like, even if you win that battle, you really lost, you know, because you had to sacrifice so much time you can't get back, and time is the only real natural resource.
Sound like the American dream, but continue.
Yeah, we can't get time back. Once the time is gone, it's gone. Like money, you can spend money, so you can get, you know, lose money, but you can go earn the money again. But you need time in order to do that, right? You know, time is the thing you can't get back. The energy you gotta expend, you know. And then another thing that I add to that is often when you're in these co-parenting formations, when you're spending so much time and energy beefing with the mother, the child is suffering, because then it's like you could have been using that energy and that focus to just be a better dad. And that's something else I can speak on experience from, because I think back on like my oldest son is 19 now, and it's a lot of times where it was a lot of times when he was young, and I would like kind of be like at war with his mom with good reason, you know, to a certain extent. But because I was so focused on that and not as much on his well-being, then he missed out, you know? So I definitely want people to think about that too. Like, what are the consequences, you know? And that's something else we get from math. Like with mathematics, you know, solving word problems, it helps you develop your consequential thinking ability, because it's constantly like, okay, if I do this, what's gonna be the outcome? Or they asking you the question like, okay, if this does this, then what's the outcome gonna be if we increase the quantity by 10 or 20 or whatever? But so even with parenting, there are consequences. So that beef and like going to war with like with the mother, and even if there's another thing too, like even if she's wrong, they're the rights. Like you can't control what she do. You can only control what you do, and that's why I think it's important too to be willing to lose. Sometimes you gotta be concede in order to win. You gotta be willing to concede to win sometimes. I know some people gonna watch this and be like, nah, I ain't doing that. Nah, nah, nah. I'm like, all right.
I figured it out.
But again, I think we gotta really focus in on, you know, that concept of a Pyrrhic victory. Because then it's like, even if you do win, did you really win?
What are you winning?
What did you have to sacrifice in order to win that? And then you have to decide, okay, then you look back on it like, because I know a lot of us been in that situation. We won something, but then it's like, what at what cost?
Research shows that children with fathers who demonstrate high paternal consistency from ages 4 to 12 perform better in reading and writing, have fewer behavioral problems, and experience improved health, academic success, and emotional well-being, right? Question I have for you is this. Do you think some mothers are unaware of the profound impact a good father can have on their child's development? Or do personal grievances sometimes take priority over what's best for the child?
I think there's a mixture of both. I think some mothers don't know it, don't take it into consideration, because oftentimes the way we view fatherhood, it's seen as very discretionary, right? Fathers are seen as disposable. Like even like when there's co-parenting, oftentimes it's like, you know, the mother may be the primary custodial parent, and then the child may go to the father's house on weekends. So he's the weekend dad. And it's like, well, nothing important really happens on the weekend. Like you just go hang out over there. It's like, you know, but which is why I advocate for more fathers to try to get 50-50, you know, physical custody you know, arrangements, right? So the fathers can be more involved with this homework after school, with doctor's appointments, with, you know, somebody, you know, the child gets sick, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning, like, yeah, you got to be in there cleaning up the vomit. You know what I'm saying? You got to be doing everything that the mother's doing, you know? Because you're not winning as a father. You're not winning by not doing those things. You're actually losing, because those are important things. That's an opportunity to bond with your child, and it's an opportunity to fulfill your responsibility as a parent, right? But I do think that oftentimes like fatherhood is seen as discretionary, disposable. It's like, you know, a lot of mothers have very low expectations for the fathers. A lot of fathers have very low expectations for themselves, you know, and again, a lot of fathers, they don't really covet or value the responsibility. So they see it as winning by not having to, you know, do the lion's share of the work. It's like, no, I'm gonna let her do all that. But I think as fathers, we got to start to adopt this philosophy of not letting somebody take your responsibility, because your responsibility, fatherhood is a very important hood. Like it's one of the best hoods ever. Like, you know what I mean? Like you got to be responsible. You can't let nobody take that from you, and you can't give it away neither. Like some people will try to take it from you, but then some fathers give it away. They just relinquish it. Like, all right, whatever. You know what I'm saying? You could just, you know, they could just stay with you, you know, all the time. But so I do think some people aren't really aware, but I think at the same time, there are mothers that may be aware and just not care, because it's an ego thing, and it's a power struggle. It's oftentimes, you know, a child may get caught in between that, right? The child may be as like, you know, like how Malcolm X in his speeches back in the day, he said that, you know, the Democratic Party would use the black community as a political football. They would just play with us, right? So there may be mothers that are using their child as a political football, right? Just to kind of like get back at the dad. It's like, you know what I mean? So I think both things happen, but I think what fathers need to do, more fathers, you know, and because a lot of fathers already do this, right? But more fathers need to really assert themselves and just establish that, like, no, I'm a father. Like, this is like, what's the definition of that? What does that look like? What does that mean in terms of time, energy, how much time the child spends with me? And even if you are like the so-called weekend dad, you got to figure out a way to, because the quantity of time is less than the quantity of time that the child is with the mother, you got to figure out a way to increase the quality of that time. So if your quantity is low, your quality has to go up. So we gotta start thinking that in terms of that.
And one of the things I noticed too with what you refer to as weekend dads, they turn into entertainers, and I think that's where they drop the ball. Because it's like they're trying to compensate for that lack of time.
Yeah.
So when they do get them, it's just fun, fun, fun. And I
Yeah.
think that bites them in the end,
And the children don't always need fun. They don't always need fun. Sometimes they need to have like those serious, stern conversations. They need the discipline. They need a lot of things. But I mean, it's challenging. Again, I think that's something else that we got to consider. Something else I often reflect on, and I'm like, marriage is challenging, but co-parenting is challenging too. So it's always going to be a situation of, choose your heart, right? Because I think that's one of the mistakes that we make as people and human beings in general. We often look for the easy way out, as if there is a path that has no resistance. Like, because we look for the path of least resistance, but we think it's like, well, if I go this way, it's going to be sweet. Like, oftentimes there is no sweet option. There's going to be a challenge regardless. You just got to decide which challenge is more suitable, and which challenge has the bigger upside.
I obviously I realized this and it took a while, but I noticed for some reason people think that there's a part of life that's supposed to be easy.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned is that life is extremely hard for every single human being on earth.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that you could do is build up your toolkit so you could deal with it better.
Yeah. Build your capacity.
Yeah, I think people think that like they're gonna get to this point where it's like no issues and everything's cool. I don't know if they think it's through success, money, being with a person, whatever it is, it's beyond delusional.
Yeah.
Life is very, very difficult, right? The only thing you can do, as I said, is build up the tools so you know how to navigate better, and it don't knock you down so much.
And you're gonna end up just having different challenges. So it's like, if you're a working class person, you got certain challenges. And then let's say, you go to school, get educated, and now you're in a different, tax bracket now, right? So you're making more money now. It's not like your life is easy now. You just got a different set of problems. You got some problems you didn't have before, but you still got problems though. But, it's all, but to your point, it's all about, knowing how to navigate, so I do think we got to really start to view life that way. Because I think a lot of us, we're driven by this desire to get to this space where we're completely devoid of
Hollywood movies, fire driving off into the sunset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. They're gonna be, and then it's like, when it's like you get to that point, or you get to that different status or that different station in life, and then you're confronted by problems, and then you sitting there confused, dazed and confused, like, yo, I'm not supposed to be having problems. I went to college, I got my degree, I did this, I did that, I make money now. Why do I have problems? The game was messed up. You didn't understand, like, no, there's still gonna be problems. You just gotta know how to navigate. And I think that's one of the things that financial resources and more understanding of the world, the way those things can benefit you, because then it's like, okay, I have more tools to be able to handle the problems. Whereas when I knew less and I didn't have as much money, it was more difficult for me to solve my problems, right? But I think some people, they got it messed up because they're expecting there to be no problems, so. But yeah, but with my point, like with marriage, there's gonna be problems. With like co-parenting, there's gonna be problems. I mean, you could be single with no kids, it's still gonna be problems. You still gonna have problems. It's gonna be some problems, but just knowing how to navigate is key. But no, I've shared legal custody of like my 13-year-old daughter, right? Same as with my 5-year-old son. You know what I mean? So I'm official, right? But if for fathers that are like taken off of a list or something, then it's almost like you're banning me from my child's school. And also then it's more difficult to get information about my child's well-being or, behavior in the school, what they're learning, you know, and if people parents need to be present. Parents need to be, generally more present than they are. A lot of parents are very present. Shout out to those parents, and even the parents that aren't as present. I think a lot of times it's because they don't really know how to be present. So then it's like one of the things we talked about earlier about providing, resources and tutelage in terms of like how to do certain things. Those of us that know better about like how to be present in schools, we have to teach the parents that don't know how to be present, how to be present. And then if once they're taught, and then if they decide like, nah, I'm cool, then we can level criticism. I think then we level the criticism. But until they've been taught, we can't assume that like they should just know better. You know what I mean? So if you remove the father, then that's like 50% of their parents. You know what I mean? So it's like you want your child to have as much parental support as possible. The school would want that. Like everybody should want that. You know, and and brother for the brothers, like what brothers got to do is we got to really start to assert ourselves as educational support. As part of the educational support system. For very long, I know I'm a teacher for 20 years, and in the majority of my experience, it's typically the mothers are much more involved, right? Fathers are involved, but I would say percentage wise, mothers are more involved in the academics, being connected to the school, coming to the back to school nights, report card conferences, just being present. And I think there are various reasons for that. Oftentimes, like schools are unwelcoming. They're unwelcoming to everybody a lot of times, but mothers and fathers. But sometimes they may be even more unwelcoming to fathers. But I think fathers have to, change that narrative. Like we have to like be present in schools, and not just the first day of school standing outside like shaking kids' hands. Like that's nice. I commend and applaud that, but that has to be maintained. That type of energy has to be maintained throughout the school year. Like we got to have that on a consistent basis, right? And you also, as a father, you can't just rely on, well, I'm gonna get the information from his mom. Or I'm gonna get the real information from her mom. Because then what happens if like, your child's mother is not able to compartmentalize as well. And let's say y'all get into an argument on Monday night. And then on Tuesday, the mother finds out that, oh, y'all son is like messing up in class. You need to know that, but you're not on the call list, right? The mother's on the call list. The mother finds out, but y'all was beefing on Monday night. So it's a very great likelihood that she's not going to call you to tell you because she's not feeling you right now. Maybe y'all might get along by Friday, but you needed to know that information on Tuesday when it happened, right? But if you're overly relying on her to be the main, like, conduit for the information, from the school, you put yourself in a bad position. And not only yourself, you put your child in a bad position. So what more fathers have to do is like really assert themselves and, be a presence in the school. Make sure the principal knows you, make sure the assistant principals know you, make sure the dean of climate and culture knows you. Make sure the crossing guards know you, like, make sure like, people know you, like, what I'm saying? Just like in your neighborhood, like, people know you, right? As a man, right? And as a father, the children that your children play with and the parents of the children that your children play with, like people will know you. So you got to like really like be present in the school like that. For the benefit of your child, and especially when you're co-parent or even when you're married, when you're in a marriage situation. Like sometimes, like fathers do the same thing, even though they're present in the household. You still need to. I still recommend and suggest to those fathers to like, increase their involvement as well. But in co-parenting, especially in co-parenting, you got to do it because you can't rely on. You shouldn't rely on somebody else anyway. Even if the mother is very conscientious, she might have a off day where not be no problem between y'all, but she just might be busy. She might have forgot. But yeah, I see that a lot though. Like, and I think there's like a division of labor in the family. Like, mothers handle certain things, fathers handle certain things. And unfortunately, like education is too important and large of an undertaking to just be like, the mom's gonna handle that. It's too much going on, especially as the child gets older, And I think that's another misconception people have is that as the child gets older, then the less parental involvement is okay. Actually, I would argue that as the child gets older, there should be even more parental involvement. You know, even though the child develops their own responsibility, they tend to handle things on their own. I think you as a parent need to be even more involved because there's even much more at stake when you get to like, you know, up in the middle school, up in especially even in high school. High school, you got a lot going on. You got like SATs, ACTs, PSATs. You got, you know, AP classes. You got to worry about college admissions. You know, all these different types of things that's going on. So, you know, you want to be as like involved as possible. You know, and so we gotta change this narrative and change not just a narrative. It's not really a narrative. We got to change the overall behavior, the popular behavior, which is let the moms deal with all the school stuff, and as the fathers, we do other stuff. Fathers like the moms can continue to perform at that level. They have that level of involvement, but the father's got to bring their level up of involvement up to at least the level that the moms is at. And I think that it's going to be a better outcome for the children because now you got more involved. They got more involvement. They got a better support system, and then the school will know that. And like I would always tell students, like when it was time for back to school night or report card conferences, I would always advocate and encourage. Look, make sure y'all come up here with your people because the teachers that may not respect you as much, that may not respect your humanity, if they know that there's a human being that they can see that cares about you, they're going to treat you. Those teachers are going to treat you differently, even if they don't really respect you. They're going to treat you differently because they know it's somebody that cares about you, that they can put a faith, that they can put eyes on.
How important is the ability to compartmentalize emotions and personal grievances when it comes to successful co-parenting?
I think it's of the utmost importance. It's of the utmost importance because if you're not able to do that, like the child is often going to suffer. Because if you feel some type of way about this woman, then it's like, you might not do certain things that need to get done for the benefit of the child. And even if, it might not be good for you, as a lot of people say, like your mental health or, your peace or whatever. People like to protect their peace, which I don't, I got reservations about that as a concept anyway. But I just think we gotta put ourselves in harm's way sometimes, and just we gotta be uncomfortable. We gotta be willing to be uncomfortable, and I think that speaks to a larger issue of like, what is your definition of parenting? Like, what does that look like? Because for parenting for me means being uncomfortable for the sake of my children, because my children didn't ask to be here. And then I think about mathematics, right? I think about like balance. Like when we solve equations, it goes back to Mayat and ancient Kemet and whatnot. One of the 7 principles is balance. Whatever I do on the left side of the equation, I'm doing the same thing on the right side of the equation, right? So things got to be balanced. So when I was conceiving this child, I felt good in that moment, right? So I might have to feel bad and feel uncomfortable later on in order to balance that out, right? So I think that thought process influences like my ideals in terms of parenting. So it's like I almost welcome opportunities to be uncomfortable because I'm like I said, number one, this child didn't ask to be here. That's number one. Number two, I was enjoying myself when I was conceiving this child, right? So, sometimes it's got to balance out. So you might have to be uncomfortable. You might have to lose sleep. You might have to, have an uncomfortable conversation, go into a space you don't want to be in, but it's for the benefit of this child. You might have to learn math. You might have to teach yourself math after all these years, because you want to be able to help your child with their math homework, right? That might be an uncomfortable thing for you because you remember in 7th grade when, the teacher yelled at you and made you feel dumb in class, right? So you have like an academic trauma, but if it's for the benefit of your child, then, I highly recommend that, people do that. People like embrace that discomfort, because it's for the child. So with the compartmentalization, I think that's, like I said, it's of the utmost importance to be able to compartmentalize. Because if you can't, then, I think a lot of people, they end up playing a less active role in their child's life because then they say, well, I'm uncomfortable as a man. It's like, well, I don't like my baby mom. I don't like her. I'm uncomfortable with her. Right. So if you say that, then it's like, okay, well, so what you gonna do? Like, well, I don't want to be around her. She get on my nerves. Okay, well, if you're not around her, then how you gonna be around your son? How you gonna be around your daughter? And then a lot of people, unfortunately, their resolution is, well, I just can't be around them neither, or the amount of time I can be around them is gonna be limited. You know, so yeah, you gotta compartmentalize. Now, how to do it? I'm sure there are different methods for different people, and based on the circumstances and based on the history of the relationship between those people. But I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of options. I mean, one thing I think that I think about from time to time is like I think we often forget, like, because we have negative experiences with the people that we've procreated with, and then oftentimes that becomes the memory that we associate with them. But we don't think about,
All a good time.
yeah, like when we first met, when it was like, yo, I really used to love her, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I really, like, it's crazy because you forget, you suppress those memories, right?
Focus
You
on
create a new narrative about that person, right? That seems to be more appropriate. So you don't have to deal with the cognitive dissonance, right? Because I think if we focused on like the good, then you'd be constantly questioning yourself, well, why are we not together, right? So you create a new narrative. But it's like, in order to, I think, co-parent more in a more healthy way and in a more effective way, you may have to tap into that true history of like, yo, when we met, like I would have did anything for this. I would have killed somebody for this girl. You know what I mean? Like, but we forget that. You know what I mean? Because it's like, well, time went on, you changed, she changed, we started treating each other differently, our signals got crossed, we got flipped. You know what I mean? So it's like I don't look at her like that no more, right? But once upon a time, you did. So, you may need to tap into that if that's what's required for you to just have a more positive interaction with her so that, and it's not, because it's not about you trying to get back with it. It's not like you trying to spin the block and like, like hit that again, right? You just I'm trying to, have a appropriate and healthy relationship with our child, and the child might be the best thing that y'all did together, and you might have had to like go through the drama and the, whatever the negativity, for the child to be here, because sometimes you know, I look at my children and I'm like, damn, despite all of the challenges that I've had with their mothers, my children are dope. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of us have dope children, so, but we may not have the best relationships with their mothers, but it's like, my DNA had to mix with your DNA in order for this child to come out like this. I mean, there's nature, but there's nurture, the nurture aspect also, nature versus nurture, environmental factors that come into play as well. But there is like, a predisposition due to genetics, and perhaps we had to mix in order for this child to be like that. So I think it goes back to also like centering the child, not centering yourself and not centering her, but centering y'all child. And if you center y'all child, then you're like, you know what? She was necessary, and she contributed to this child that I love, and she gave me this child. And I think that's another thing too that can help brothers too, because when you look at it, it's like, in a relationship with a man and a woman, it's like, one night I could wash the dishes, one night you could wash the dishes, one night I could cook, another night you could cook. One night I might take out the trash. Well, I'm in my household, I always take out the trash, but we might decide like, you know what? One night I might take out the trash. Next week you take out the trash or whatever, right? With childbearing, that's all her. I can't say, you know what? This next baby, I'm gonna carry this next baby. So I think that's another thing too. When you think about like what women experience with childbearing and child rearing and carrying a child, that whole gestation period, 10 months and whatnot, swollen feet, throwing up, losing their shape and their body, being miserable, being uncomfortable, all of that. And then at the end of the day, it's like a part of it is like, damn, this was a gift. She gave you this gift. So it's like, she might really get on your nerves, like really be on your nerves. But then you got to think back, like, she did give me this baby though. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, that might be enough to like give her some grace. Even if I don't, like, everybody got their own situations, and I've heard some stories of people who do some very trifling things, but at the end of the day, she gave you that baby. You know what I'm saying? So I think if we start to, consider those things, that might make it easier for us to co-parent. You know, and these are, you know, these are all like thoughts that I've had over the years. You know, like I've been a father for almost 20 years now. So I've, you know, made a lot of mistakes. I've, you know, considered a lot of things, analyzed things in certain ways, reassessed, reevaluated, you know, refined my analysis. I've done a lot. I've learned from some brothers, seen their experience. You know, I think I've helped some brothers, you know, by giving them some insights. So yeah. But it's like I said, fatherhood is one of the best hoods, you know, and it's a learning experience, you know, and you're gonna always learn, and you're gonna always be growing constantly, and your children will never outgrow the need for you. So you got to be constantly growing, because, you know, like I'm like three different parents in one, because I got a 19-year-old son, a 13-year-old daughter, and a 5-year-old son. So I gotta be three different parents, because those three children need very different things, you know. And some of them all, if we all together at the same time, like, you know, like they all need different things at the same time. So it's a balancing act, you know. But it's a beautiful thing though, you know. I wouldn't trade it, you know what I mean. But yeah, but we gotta figure out like ways to co-parent in a more healthy ways, you know, and be committed to the process of learning. You know, I definitely feel that. And if we can commit, if brothers that are having challenges with it, if they can commit to the process of learning and becoming better, then I think they're gonna be fine. And not just them, the children, because again, it's about centering the children, because it's really not about them. It's really about the kids.
Listen to you talk, man. It seemed like you spent a lot of time reflecting on life and analyzing stuff. And I want you to incorporate your personal experience, but with the math also, right? From a mathematical perspective, how do you view marriage and the importance of marriage?
I think marriage is very important. I think marriage is a critically important institution, in our community, especially. I think of, you know, one of my goals is to nation build, you know, for people of African descent, to nation build. And I think that the family is the microcosm of the nation, right? So, and in order to have, I think the strongest families are families where the mother is a mother and father that are married. And I say that as a person that was married and is no longer married, and I still have the respect for the institution. I love to see Black people married, healthy marriages. You know, the children can see, children can experience, and whatnot. Because I think there's just a lot of that. It becomes certain things become a constant. You know, when you have marriage, like when you think about like mathematically speaking, you have constants and you have variables. Oftentimes in like co-parenting situations, certain things become variables, right?
Moving pieces,
Yeah.
possibilities.
Some things are not as easy to rely on, right? Because, you know, like, you know, with a co-parenting situation, it's like me and the mother are not together.
Other people could come in, just a lot of different
Yeah.
pieces.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm living my own life. She's living her own life. We constantly have to kind of figure out how to balance, you know, the lives that we're living as individuals with the lives that we have to lead as co-parents for this child. And oftentimes that gets messy, right? In a healthy marriage, that's not as much of a consideration, because that's why I say healthy. I say healthy marriage because all marriages are not created equal, right? In a healthy marriage, the mother and father, the husband and wife, they should be on the same page, at least the vast majority of the time. So it's a lot of things you can just kind of like take for granted, you know, or even just in a relationship, like, because I know, like, I remember I would think back, I would reflect on like some of the arguments and disagreements I would have with, you know, my children's mothers at different times. And I'd be like, if we was together, she knows she wouldn't even have cared about that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't even been no big deal. But because it's like, You know, he over there living his best life, and you know, whatever. Nah, I ain't doing that. Like, nah, I'm not gonna let him go do that. No, he can't pick her up at that time or whatever. Like, no, you know, nah, you got to drop him off at this time because you know. But if you know we was together, you know what I'm saying, then it wouldn't have been that deep, right? Um, but I think just marriage just provides like a solid foundation, you know, from which to you know develop children. You know, it's almost like it's a solid structure. Like marriage is a structure. At least that's how I see it. That's how I see it.
Hey, I got a theory, bro. I want to hear what you have to say. Not for men, but for women. I feel when a woman's impregnated by a man, she always loves him, regardless of what she says.
I can see that. I can see. I think that's plausible.
Because I'm talking about what I've observed in life. Not men. It's something about men where I haven't seen that to be the case. Not saying that it is. But with women, it seems like it's something about like having a kid for a man. I don't care what they say. I don't care how they act. Right? They still love that man. And I actually feel the harsher they act, the more that they love you.
You made me think of that too, right? Because you think about like, you know, it's almost like a constant reminder. It's like, I carried this baby for you for 10 months, right? I could have died. You know what I'm saying? Like this other human being took over my body. You know what I mean? Like, and this is a gift that I gave to you, right? And then, you know, so now like things that you do that I don't like, I'm even more, it's almost like, it's almost like, I don't know, maybe if I could theorize, maybe they might feel like it's almost like a contractual obligation. Like you have a contractual obligation, like to not get on my nerves or like, you know, or to even be with me perhaps. Right. So to your point, yeah, I can see that like how, you know, cause as they say, it's a thin line between love and hate, right? A very thin line. And a lot of times that hatred really comes from like, you know, I want to love this person, but the circumstances won't allow me to love this person. And I believe that it's their fault based on their actions. They won't allow for me to be in a position where I'm able to love them. And it's actually like to your theory, it's natural for me to love them. Like she may be either feeling, even if she can't articulate it, it's natural for me to love you.
And I want to touch on something you just said in regards to the behavior. Along with it being socialized, there's an expectation from the peers and the environment for her to behave in a way or have an animosity towards you. I personally, like, I see this with cheating, right? I think celebrities break up because the world knows. If it was just the two people knowing, they wouldn't separate.
I can see that. The whole celebrity, yeah.
So it's just like, it's the pressure, it's the expectation that, especially when you're in an environment where people aren't necessarily emotionally mature or mature, right. Just the expectation is for you to behave in that manner, and that behavior is supported. Because a lot of women, unfortunately, not all, but based on the environment they're in, if they were to treat the man just kind of chill, their peers would act like, why are you, they would encourage a more, you know, rougher experience. So I think that kind of expectation from peers pushes a lot of sisters to behave in that manner, that aggression.
Almost like being on code. It's like, yeah, based on his behavior, I have to treat him like this.
This is how you should be responding. And you're a fool for not responding like that.
Because it could be seen as mathematical. It's like based on how she may look at it as based on his behavior, I'm actually reciprocating, right? I'm reciprocating this type of behavior back to him because this is how he came at me. This is how he made me feel. These were the actions that he put out into the universe. So I can see that. Yeah.
It's pretty tricky, man. I think majority of people's behaviors personally, I may be wrong, but I don't think they want to do it. They're so pressured, especially the demographic that you're in, like the ecosystem that you're in.
Yeah.
The expectation that's there, they try to match it. And depending on the environment that you're in, it may not be beneficial to all parties involved.